right, welcome to a very special episode of Cosmic Road today, where we are joined by the one and only Steve Bassett. Thank you so much for joining the show, Steve.
My pleasure.
I love it. So last time we talked about a lot about the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, and guys, if you don't know, of course, Steve is the world's first UFO lobbyist, as far as I know. Also, the founder of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, and we talked a lot about how Steve got started in UFOs and about the foundation of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. Great stuff. I'm really excited about that movement. What are y'all working on now?
Well, first, I co-founded the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance with Dan Harari,
Thanks for the correction. Okay.
Who is carrying most of the workload right now. And we're now up to 160 some members, I think, and we're getting new members all the time. People who have a background in the film or content creation business, or a background in the UAP world, researchers, activists, journalists, documentaries, whatever, and we're helping them network together to create content. It has been successful. It's still young. Got some more work to do to get some funding for it, but it is a 501c3 nonprofit, and it does have a GoFundMe page, Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. Yes, I was the first person to register as a lobbyist. No one ever was ever crazy enough to do it, and I was the only one. Though I'm really an activist, not a lobbyist. I wasn't like I was going up on the hill, but I did lobby the hell out of the media. But now I think there's about 5 or 6 or 7 registrations, which is a good sign, okay, of where things are going. So to answer your question, what's happening now can be described as a pre-disclosure consolidation process. We are right up to the end line. I like to say we're on the 1 yard line on this issue after 77 years. And by disclosure, I'm referring to capital D disclosure. I'm referring to a confirmation event, which has to come from the president. Hopefully our president will be the first one, but if not, our president will be the second or third one. But whatever, the president is going to have to confirm the non-human presence, extraterrestrial presence. And we're right there. So that's good. And if the legislation that was originally submitted by Chuck Schumer and Mike Rounds as the UAP Disclosure Act into the National Defense Authorization Act of 2024, this was back last year, if it had gone through without being modified, without being essentially reduced to a rump portion of the NDAA. The basic concepts were there, but the powers were taken away. A little bit of a setback. If that bill had passed and been signed into law in December of last year, I think it's very likely that Mark Warner would have called the hearing before the Senate Intel that we have to have. No disrespect to the House subcommittee or the Oversight Subcommittee. We're talking about the Intel Committee here. There are plenty of witnesses ready to testify, most of which are all military. They all have had clearances. Their testimony would be pretty persuasive. 20 would be enough. 1 week would be enough. I think we would have had that hearing. I think we'd have had it early this year, well ahead of the true campaign. But that didn't happen. So the bill was significantly reduced. That definitely pushed things back. And they couldn't decide what to do. And then before you know it, we're into the campaign season. And at that point, the chances of having that hearing probably dropped to 0. Okay, fine. But we're still on the 1 yard line. And some things have happened. So with that in mind, while we're encouraging people to contact the government, contact their representatives saying, look, we want this hearing, we want disclosure, what have you, that's fine. Overall, in a sense, we're in a holding pattern until this election is done. So I have no expectations of a Senate Intel Committee hearing at all prior to the the election being done at minimum. I'll get back to that. There is some talk that the House would like to have another hearing. Tim Burchett and his crew. That may happen. It's fine. They do, good. But will it be of a type and a scope that it would set the stage for the president to disclose? Highly unlikely. So that's kind of where we are. Now, meanwhile, there's plenty of people that are aware of this situation, and they are planning for the inevitable disclosure event, which means the beginning of the post-disclosure world or era. And so a lot of what's happening is actually about that. In fact, the whole process underway is about getting to disclosure, post-disclosure. It's not about finding out what this ET thing is or phenomenon is. Government's known about that for decades. But all of this is being set up so what the president can disclose and do so in an appropriate way, nonpartisan and so forth. And so that's somewhat confusing to people. Let me just pull my thing back up here. Got my video just came off. Where'd it go? There. So what you have is this what we'll call preparation. Danny Sheehan is was able to finally get funding earlier this year for a think tank that he's wanted to put in play for a decade, for a long time, maybe 20 years. But finally, because of the circumstances that have unfolded, he was able to get the necessary funding to launch the New Paradigm Institute.org, New Paradigm Institute. So this is going to be the lead think tank post-disclosure, and most of everything it's doing is in that vein. It's got projects and ways to contact your senators and members of Congress and so forth. So in a sense, it is advocating for the disclosure process to achieve a confirmation event. But a great deal, really, of what's going on with the New Paradigm Institute is preparing for the post-disclosure world. The Soul Foundation, set up by Gary Nolan with others, is a scientific think tank also being set up to deal with the post-disclosure world because of all of the scientific implications and possible new science that could emerge once the government is finally releasing its files and information, which it will do. And then you've got the UAP Disclosure Fund, which was just set up, and that fund is pretty much a post-disclosure fund. In other words, they're trying to raise money as a 501c4 to be able to fund, provide funding to certain candidates in the post-disclosure world that the fund feels are going to serve our interests in this new paradigm, as opposed to others. Again, there is that. MUFON is preparing for the post-disclosure world. It has a lobbying firm. It has a full media operation, and I'm sure it has plans to engage the issue in newer and more complex ways after disclosure. So that's kind of what's going on. So we've got 5 more months at least to continue to put things together. You're going to see other organizations forming ahead of what we think will be disclosure. So that's what's going on now. I'm doing lots of podcasts to talk about that at a very high rate. I think I'm averaging now about 5 to 6 a week. And I do have a lecture in Denver this weekend.
Nice.
And then I'm going to be on a cruise, basically what amounts to a disclosure cruise. It's called Contact at Sea. And there's at least 5 or 6 events. We're going to be dealing with this issue for 6 days on the Ovation of the Seas out of Seattle.
I mean, who needs contact in the desert? Who would not rather be on a cruise ship, right? Come on.
Well, Contact at Sea is going to be very different than Contact in the Desert, though that was a pretty successful conference. It went very well. This is going to be Contact at Sea. Very good. It's the first cruise I've ever been on in my life. And there's about 20-some speakers, including Danny Sheehan, Grant Cameron, Paul Hynek, Jimmy Church, and others, and many speakers in the what we'll call the consciousness genre and so forth. So it's going to be great. But if for me, it's just another opportunity to network and get the information across and meet people. So while there are going to be a number of excursions, I'm not leaving the boat. I'm not going to be doing any excursions into Alaska. Nothing against Alaska. I'm sure it's cool, but I can't. I need to stay on that boat along with a lot of other people and continue to meet and have dialogue with individuals. So it's going to be a 6 week, 6 day activist cruise as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so that's coming up, and Twitter Spaces and what have you. So I'm very comfortable with where things are now. The most important thing is that the domestic political situation is settling down. All right, it is finally getting back to some sense of normalcy for the first time, and I don't know when. So where we are is now we have two defined. We have the tickets for both parties settled. The nominating conventions are going to be fairly straightforward. They're not going to be open conventions. It's not going to be a lot of hullabaloo. There'll be a lot of campaigning, but they will not get. There won't be any chaos really, because the tickets are already picked. So that'll be kind of straightforward. We're moving into a standard campaign period, which is going to be fairly nasty and intense, but nevertheless kind of standard. So that's good. And then, of course, we're going to have an election on November the 5th. I suspect that is going to be a little less controversial this time. I'm not saying there won't be controversy, but I'm not anticipating what we had last time. And so that's good to look forward to. And then after the election, there is a period from November the 5th through January 20th. It's called the transition period. And it's like 25, 55, 56. It's about 75, 76 days. It is possible that Mark Warner may choose to, regardless of who wins the White House, may choose to call that hearing during that transition period. And I'm talking about a week's worth of testimony from about 20 witnesses, all of which are David Grush types. If he does, and he does it early in the transition, then it's quite possible then that, and this hearing that, as I imagine it, will blow the truth embargo up. I mean, it just won't be any pieces left hardly. And in fact, it sets the stage for President Biden to come forward and be the disclosure president, be the one that confirms it. Which is, there's a logic to it. He will go out with a huge legacy in a big way as the disclosure president, capping his 50 years of service. So given that Warner's a Democrat, he might be thinking that way. But there's another approach. He could wait until later in the transition period, after January 1, and hold the hearing closer to the inauguration. With the idea that then it would be the next president, whoever that is, that will come forward to disclose the PT process.
I love it. Whoever does it, it would be wonderful. I just wanted to throw this idea out there because you're closer to all this than I am. Last UFO hearing, we had three witnesses. What if instead of having a barrage of witnesses at this hearing, we had 3 witnesses per hearing every month for a year?
Oh no.
Just saturate the public. With every monthly hearing, we get a month's worth of press, and then you would have the new round of witnesses, and then after a year of that, the public just soaked in this UFO disclosure. The president wouldn't have any choice but to disclose. And
again, 1 week of the witnesses ready to testify, some of whom are old and may not last a year, is more than enough. In other words, this is a political process. It's not a streaming series. You just can't go to the politics and say we're gonna do a streaming series. It's going to be
stay tuned for next time, Steve. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So no. Yeah, I get it, but again, that's not the way politics works.
So are we going to get all 40 of David Grush's witnesses?
Well, no, it's not David Grush's witnesses.
Okay. Okay. Who is going to come forward at this hearing?
Well, there have been dozens of witnesses that have already spoken with members of Congress or their staff, going back 3.5 years. How many total, we don't know. Could easily be 100, right? So there are many to choose from. But it needs to be enough. In other words, we need to have a hearing at the level and the intensity of the Iran-Contra hearings, the Nixon hearings, the McCarthy hearing. I mean, this has got to be big time. And so I estimate a week is more than enough. 2 witnesses in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. So that's 10 sessions, 20 witnesses selected from scores of witnesses. And then the committee has the privilege of putting forward any visual evidence it wants to show, film, gun camera footage, anything. It can add that if it wants to. Probably not even needed, but they can do that too. But whatever, this hearing, like the Nixon hearing, which is what ultimately forced President Nixon to resign. Without that hearing, he probably would not resign. But millions and millions of people saw the hearing, heard the testimony, ball game. Same thing here. So about 1 week, 20 witnesses, maybe even 10 will be more than enough. It's done. It's locked down. Millions of people will watch that hearing. They will be fully saturated. Okay. And so at that point, the president can come forward without in an aggressive or a way or non-partisan way and say, oh, guess what? There's something I meant to tell you, but didn't. No, it's going to come forward and basically say this testimony is convinced my top aides, my top people. I've discussed it with them. I've discussed it with the DOD and so forth. And yes, clearly, it confirms that we're not alone. And obviously, there's a lot that I don't actually know about. And I want to know more. You want to know more. And we're going to get that to you. And of course, the bill to get it to them has been signed, right? That's the process. So we have a relatively straightforward process here that could lead to disclosure from Biden during the transition period or from the new president early on. I assure you, if that hearing takes place, the idea that they can then just sort of hang around for a while, drag their feet with the world on fire, not going to happen. All right, so they will be literally, whether they, and if they want to, I believe, I think it's what they want to do, but there will be no doubt that disclosure will have to take place. Now, if we do not get the legislation, let's consider that. And we might not. However, and this is the key thing I want to talk about today, is that the circumstances regarding the legislation now has taken a dramatic turn, which very few people know about, because this turn occurred on July the 11th. I think one article has been written about it so far. And what is today? August 7th. Because I'm logging in the articles. I think there's maybe one. Very few people know that it occurred on the 11th because of the assassination attempt on the 13th and other developments subsequent to that. The press has simply not covered this. I get it. And even within UAP, ET circles, not too many people know. Well, I'm going to tell your viewers exactly what happened. And then I'm going to show them. We're going to do a little share. But politics is a chess game. A chess game of moves and counter moves. It's also a diplomatic game. It's like negotiation. So it's 2 games in one. It's kind of like the negotiating game and also a chess game trying to get a winner and a negotiating game trying to get something done. Right? So we know that the Senate is completely committed to disclosure. We know this because of statements from a number of members of the Senate Intel Committee, and of course, the 4 tranches of legislation that emanated from the Senate Intel Committee, and so forth, and letters that they have signed to Arrow and I think to the White House regarding the fact that this needs to move forward. All 17 members signed it. So we know that they are committed, and obviously the legislation that was put into the NDA last year and passed, obviously, came out of the Senate Intel Committee, was passed by the Senate, confirmed that commitment. Now, that legislation was stripped because of very aggressive actions by certain powerful members of Congress on behalf of the defense contractors, who were very upset that eminent domain was in that proposed bill, UAP Disclosure Act, which threatened their ability to, an anticipated ability, to make billions of dollars from proprietary and patent positions that they expected to have with regard to ideas, engineering, so forth, and science from studying non-human craft for decades. And suddenly that was threatened. Now, there were other parts of the bill they weren't thrilled about, but there were people in the DOD as well who believe that the truth embargo is the right policy and that anything that ends it is against our national security interests. And so I think they also contributed to this pushback, which we didn't know about for a while, but eventually, because this is 2024, not 1964, and so consequently, it became known in about a couple of weeks what was going on, and we have a pretty good idea of who stripped the language, how they put the leverage, applied the leverage, and so forth. And so
Well, Sean Kirkpatrick has admitted to being at least part of that.
he was part of it, but his role gets even worse. But so that bill was gutted, but it was passed. It's there, but it wasn't enough. All right. And so after they succeeded in stripping the bill, they probably were feeling pretty confident, pretty good about themselves. But they were playing checkers with a grandmaster chess player, Chuck Schumer. And so the first thing, very shortly after the bill was gutted, Chuck Schumer and Mike Rounds personally went into the Senate chamber to record into the record, meaning it was going to go in the congressional record, but they were just talking to a camera. There was nobody else in there except maybe the cleaning people. And in that 5-minute statement, he goes on about how, no, we're not done. We're gonna get this. We're unhappy, disappointed, a little angry with our Republicans friends who pretty much led the charge to cut it. But we're gonna do this anyway. And so I think the people that oppose disclosure probably a little taken back by that. You're not going to just give in and just call it a day, walk away. Apparently not. And of course, it occurred to them, well, anytime he wants, he can introduce a standalone bill anytime into the Senate. It will probably pass. It can't be stripped down. It's standalone. Well, it could be through amendment process, but it wouldn't be. And they could take a standalone bill, same exact thing, get it passed in the Senate, and then over in the House, somebody will agree to submit it there and force the House to vote it down. All right. So they realize that, and they go, "Uh-oh, boy, maybe we won the battle, lost the war." And then, of course, they may have also been reminded by somebody that Mark Warner is independent of them. He can't be stopped from holding a hearing by the defense contractors or the DOD, not without breaking some serious laws. And so if Mark Warner wants to bring those 20 witnesses up on the Hill, he'll do it, and they can't stop him. And so they're going, yeah. And so they did something else, something even more outrageous than stupid. As a kind of last-ditch Hail Mary pass, they said, look, we got to stop this. We got to stop this. And so they threw together, quote, a study called the Arrow Study, All Domain Resolution Office, in which they simply lied through their teeth. I mean, the whole thing is bogus, stating that they'd investigated all of the reports going back to 1947 and could find nothing, which is so obviously a lie that it's embarrassing even to talk about it. But it's awful. But they're thinking the press is still gullible enough to believe it, and the public is stupid enough to believe it. And then, but they couldn't just do that. They had to convince Sean Kirkpatrick, who was very unhappy, who had already indicated he was going to move on, he was going to resign from Arrow because it wasn't a fun deal for him, and I understand exactly why. Because it was, I don't think if it's what, even if he knew it was going down, it still was going to be brutal for him. And so he'd already quit. He said he was going to quit, but before he quit, they got him to sign that report. So he signs the study, it goes out, and they're thinking that shuts everything down. In other words, it's the it is the Condon report of 1969, circa 2024. Well, this isn't 1969.
Well, Arrow is Blue Book 2.0, so why not, right?
Uh, well, Arrow hasn't done any investigation at all, basically. So it's not Blue Book. It is just happened to be an organization. It's formal, but it hasn't done anything. So they didn't even
I
shut
mean,
it
in
down.
the sense of suppressing this information and debunking UFOs.
It
No,
wasn't set up.
you're frowning at that. Okay, you
It
don't agree
wasn't
with
set
that.
up. It wasn't set up to debunk UFOs. Arrow was set up to be there, to be in place. Okay, like when you inaugurate the president. When we inaugurate the president in January the 20th, in order to do that, you've got to set up all the scaffolding and platforms and a lot of stuff for this huge event that will take place on Capitol Hill, where you swear in the new president, and you have to go to all that trouble, and you do it. And as a fact, after the swearing in, you take it down. But the point is, you got to set that stuff up ahead of that inauguration. And that's exactly what's going on now and has been going on for 4 years, with one difference. Okay. In the case of establishing the structure upon which the new president, can take the oath, this is establishing all the necessary structure to deal with when the president confirms the ET presence. So we can then deal with what comes next, like the next day. And the difference is, unlike the inauguration analogy, they're not going to tear it all down. This stuff is being set up and these laws are being passed, and they're going to be essentially involved in the post-disclosure world forever. All right. And so that's what's going on, not to debunk the issue. So Arrow is basically a placeholder, or no, not so a placeholder, but a structure set up ahead of the disclosure event when it happens. Now, whether Kirkpatrick knew that or not, I don't know. But either way, it was going to be brutal unless things happened quickly, right? If things moved along quickly. And they might have gone more quickly, except something happened in 2023 that was not in the script, that they kind of knew could happen, but I think they didn't think would happen, and that is David Grush coming forward on June the 5th. And so all of that kind of threw things up in the air, pushed it forward until finally it gets into the campaign situation too deeply that we're not going to go forward. But as I'm pointing out, subsequent to the bill being gutted, it became apparent to the opponents of the truth embargo that they're still losing. And so the Arrow report was a Hail Mary pass study to try to salvage it. It was a disaster. It was ridiculous. Nobody believed it. It was embarrassing and a disgrace. And since this is in 1969, it was savaged on the internet and social media. So it was a huge mistake. Okay, what can I say? And by the way, there was a response, important response to this. And the first one came from Robert Garcia in the House. What Robert Garcia did to let the Department of Defense know that we're not buying that stupid report is that he submitted, with no chance of it going anywhere, he submitted into the House a smaller version of the UAP Disclosure Act. I think it focused just on the UAP review board, right? Just kind of dropped it in there. And of course, Johnson shut it down immediately, said that's not going anywhere. The point is, by doing it, he was sending a message to the DOD. We don't believe a word in that report. All right. And that's coming from the House. Okay, fine. Meanwhile, the social media is tearing them all up. And maybe they're starting to realize that this is not going to go the way they hoped. Well, it didn't. And on July the 11th, their worst fears were realized. Because what happened on July the 11th, and I didn't expect it this soon, Chuck Schumer made the next move in the chess game. And this one is practically mate in two. What he did was to announce and put up on the Senate site that he was going to, for 2025, I guess you could say. Actually, wait a minute, let me back off on that. He is submitting an amendment, right, to the 2024 bill, which is the FY NDAA 2025. He's submitting the UAP Disclosure Act, pretty much everything. The only difference I can see is the wording's been tightened up a little bit, a little crisper, but it's essentially the exact thing. It's got everything: subpoena, the review board, eminent domain, the whole disclosure control plan, everything. And he's submitting it as a floor amendment. Now, what does that mean? Here's what it means. The UFP Disclosure Act was gutted because it was part of the NDAA bill, and therefore subject to reconciliation in conference to get the language the same for both the House and the Senate. And it was in that conference behind closed doors that they gutted the bill. And then it was sent back to the House and Senate. It was passed, and we move on. This time he's submitting it as an amendment. What does that mean, floor amendment? It means that it's not going to go through reconciliation in that sense. It's going to be submitted after the bill has passed in the Senate. In other words, they're going to do all the language, right? And then they're going to submit it as an amendment to the bill, in which case all of the language will be exactly what it is. And it will have to be, or almost certainly will have to be, passed up or down vote. Now, there might be some amendment effort to change it, right? Wait a minute, we want to amend the amendment, and because there will be a debate, but it's not going to work. And so that bill is going to get an up or down vote exactly as is on the floor of the Senate. It's got to be on TV, not some closed conference room. And if you've seen this, you've seen this on TV where they got all the vote tallies and everything, and they're showing a picture of the Senate floor, and they're counting the votes and all that kind of stuff, and it will be voted up. Okay, now the House, all right, is going to be looking at the NDA bill, all right, but the amendment, no. The House, as part of the reconciliation process, will look at the NDA language and the Senate and the NDA language that they want, and they'll have a conference and they'll get it all together, and then they'll send it back to the Senate and the House for a vote. However, before that happens, right, and possibly, very possibly, when the House votes on its version prior to reconciliation, right, these are two separate processes. I will not be shocked if somebody in the House submits that amendment as an amendment in the House to the House version of the bill, exactly word for word, which the House will vote down, okay? But publicly, you'll see the vote on TV. You'll see exactly who voted against it, right? It will be transparent, and that's going to be much tougher, with much more significant consequence to every member that votes against it. And then they will vote it down, and then the bill will be reconciled. It will be submitted back to the House and Senate again for the final vote, in which case the amendment, right, will be put forth again in the Senate, where it will pass, and it will be put forth again in the House. They'll have to fail it again, now with an even bigger audience. In other words, Schumer has basically screwed them. All right. He has come back strategically, which he could have done before, right? But maybe thought he wouldn't need to. But now he has made a huge strategic maneuver. And this is important as well, because as it happens in politics, there are many times when somebody will submit a bill, could be even an important bill, and they submit it knowing there's no way it's going to pass, but just submit it, right? So they can show the faith, right? I'm behind this, and I put this bill in, but they know it's not going to pass, and it doesn't pass, and they move on. And that can happen. But the clue that that's not what they're doing is strategy. The moment you start to see strategic maneuvers, you know that they are quite serious about this. And so this maneuver of a floor amendment is a absolute strategy on the part of the Senate Intel Committee and the part of Schumer and Rounds to get this done. So this is the real deal. And so that was dropped on the 11th of July. And not much has come out about it. Not much is going to be done about it because there is an election campaign fully underway. The votes on the Senate and House side are still months and months away, but it's going to sit there up on the Senate site for months, being read by people all over the world again, right? And so I assure you, the saturation level in this planet about what the hell's going on here in the U.S. is growing quickly. And so that is where things are. And if you like, I can actually pull up and show this amendment to your viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it. Here, let you share your screen. Yeah, there you go.
I got the share. I'm good. Gonna go with the share here. Are you seeing it?
Yeah, congress.gov. Okay. There it is.
So here it is. It is, you know, it amends the S-4638, that's the Senate version of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2025, which will be passed later this year and voted on and signed into law by the president in December. The sponsor is Senator Rounds. However, they quickly mention down below that it also includes Senator Schumer. And so just a quick opening statements, which is what they do. Mr. Rounds, for himself and Mr. Schumer. I like the fact that in this context, they refer to each other as Misters. Submitted an amendment intended to be proposed by him to the bill, right? Meaning the Senate NDAA bill 4638, to authorize appropriations for fiscal year 25 for military activities, etc. That's the NDAA bill. Okay. The actual thing they're submitting is referred to as a division. And the name of the division is Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Disclosure. And then, all right, the title is the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Disclosure Act, or the UAP Disclosure Act of 2024, meaning it's for the 2025 NDAA, but it's being signed in 24. That is the same name as the bill, okay, but it's an amendment. And without even getting into the nitty gritty of the bill, just the preliminary statements tells you, or should tell anybody who could think what's coming and how serious this is. So first you have your findings and declarations, meaning these are the findings and the declarations associated with this bill and why it's being done. And it's very significant. All federal government records related to unidentified anomalous phenomena, I shall use UAP, should be preserved and centralized for historical and federal government purpose. Sounds trivial, doesn't it? What is just said, if this bill is passed, that everybody out there in government has to understand that all the records have got to be identified, they're going to be identified, and they have to be preserved. So forget the burn baskets, forget the shredding machines, you go there, you're going to go to jail. 2, all federal government records concerning UAP should carry a presumption of immediate disclosure. Think about that. What they're saying is, if you got it, okay, it has the presumption of immediate disclosure. Now, does that mean it's going to be tomorrow? No, it just means that technically it could be disclosed tomorrow. And you have to presume that in the way you deal with them. That is a very serious statement, all right?
Immediate disclosure sounds good.
All records should be eventually disclosed to enable the public to become fully informed about the history of the federal government's knowledge and involvement surrounding UAP. That's the whole enchilada, all the way back to Roswell, all the way back further if necessary. It's everything. 3, legislation is necessary to create an enforceable, independent, and accountable process for the public disclosure. That's fine. And then you got this. Legislation is necessary because credible evidence and testimony indicates that federal government UAP records exist that have not been declassified. Really, Charlie, have not been have not been declassified or subject to mandatory declassification review as set forth in Executive Order 13526. It's one of the earlier acts. Due in part, and this is really important, very few people, 1 in 1,000 who reads this bill is going to know why this is important. Maybe 1 in 10,000 in the general public. In the research community, maybe 1 in 50. This is because, all right, related classified national due in part to exemption under the Atomic Energy Act of 1954, as well as an overbroad interpretation of classified foreign nuclear information, which is also exempt from mandatory declassification, thereby preventing public disclosure. Why is this so important? If you read enough of the research of my colleagues, there are a few places where this comes up. It's not everywhere. It's not one of the things that gets a huge amount of attention, but some researchers are talking to it. A couple of witnesses have talked about it. And this is what they say, which the government has never acknowledged, is that a huge portion of all of the government's activities with respect to UAP phenomena, right? Non-human tech, non-human bodies and records and whatever, a huge portion of it, in addition to be protected by the declassification systems and the nature of unacknowledged special access programs. These are programs that are classified and you can't even acknowledge they exist, even to people in the government, even to people who are higher than you, unless they have the special access, right? Which gives them a lot of protection. But in top of that, they buried it underneath the Atomic Energy Act and the Department of Energy, right? So that it was even more unapproachable, because that agency, because of that act, has even more special exemptions from access. So what this amendment is saying, we the Senate, Chuck Schumer, and we know that. We know about that. I read, I read Richard Dolan. Okay, I read Timothy Good. We know about it. That's a big deal. I mean, they've just outed the Atomic Energy Act and the Department of Energy as being a major holder of this information.
Yeah, Jacques Vallée has even gone further than that. He has said in order to be read into the program, the UFO program, whatever it is, one has to be first read into the nuclear secrets. I don't know if that's true or not. Well, what's your take on that?
I imagine in some programs. I mean, if you're talking about in anything that is underneath that aegis, right, that are in that area, underneath the Atomic Energy Act, yeah, there may be some other programs that are not under the Atomic Energy Act that you don't have to have that, but it wouldn't shock me at all if some people, yeah, they have to go ahead and sign that as well. So they're basically saying, yeah, we know about that. And then legislation is necessary to restore proper oversight over UAP records by elected officials in both the executive and legislative branch of the federal government that has otherwise been lacking as of the enactment of this act. That's an understatement, okay? They're acknowledging the oversight they were supposed to have, they didn't get. 7, legislation is necessary to afford complete and timely access to all knowledge gained by the federal government concerning UAP in furtherance of comprehensive, open scientific and technological research.
I like the idea of open.
Right. Essential to avoiding or mitigating potential technological surprise in furtherance of urgent national security concerns and public interest. Now, this is very carefully written and very important. Why? Okay. 1, what this particular paragraph is saying, we fully recognize that the embargo of the US information and work on non-human tech and the science and engineering garnished from that has been withheld from the public has significantly limited the ability to utilize and develop that science and technology because it's only available to a select group of government scientists, and the rest of the scientific world, right, which is pretty big, doesn't have access. That's a whole lot of geniuses whose minds are not in place. They basically saying, yeah, we know that, and that needs to change. And then it says the other reason is the development essential to avoiding or mitigating potential technological surprise in furtherance of urgent national security concerns. That is very carefully written, all right? Because there is a view that one of the reasons for the truth embargo is that they are petrified of an ET attack, right? Which would be a form of surprise, right? A technological surprise, meaning the extraterrestrials got better technology, and if they attack us, we're going to find out just how good it is. But no, that's not what they're referring to, because they wouldn't have phrased it this way. What they mean by technological surprise is that they are acknowledging that other countries have ET vehicles. They just don't crash in the United States. What can I say? And that they are also studying that tech and science, and they are concerned about something that they are doing, emerging and becoming a national security concern for us, which is essentially acknowledging that to one degree or another, there is an ET technology race underway, which could be an ET technology weapons arms race underway. Doesn't confirm that. And
if it can be weaponized, it will.
Yeah, that's true. And so at minimum, there is technological advancement happening because another country, their scientists might learn something from the tech, some engineering or science aspect of the tech that we don't have, that we didn't learn for whatever reason. So that would be a benefit to them. But most concerning is, yeah, if they're trying to build ET tech-based weapons, yeah, we got a problem. And so that is what that is referring to. And then purposes, okay? The purpose of this division, this amendment, are a UAP records collection at the National Archives and Records Administration, and to require the expeditious public transmission to the archivist and public disclosure of such records. In other words, the purpose of this amendment is full and total disclosure of everything, as in everything, to the American people and subsequently the world. That's pretty clear. That's all you could possibly want. That is everything that has been needed, and it's right there in the front of the bill.
I love it. That's gorgeous. Gorgeous, Steve.
See what I mean? See how now this is what is going to be going in front of the Senate and the House down the line for an up or down vote. And we're going to watch the vote. We're going to know exactly who votes against it, right? No hocus pocus. And it's going to be a lot harder for those opposing this bill to vote no. It may very well pass on first run, both in the House and the Senate, and bingo, it becomes law in December.
Man, wouldn't that be nice?
Just a couple other things. Archivist, we know what that is. Close observer. They bother to identify close observer means anyone who has come into close proximity to unidentified anomalous phenomena or non-human intelligence. Think about that, okay? They could have just said anybody who's come close in proximity to UAP, but they included well, we all know what non-human intelligence is, don't we? It's not going to one of those water shows with the porpoises and the killer whales, right? It's not hanging out with elephants. Very smart animals, to be sure. Intelligent, to be sure. Hell, your dogs are pretty intelligent. You'd be surprised how smart.
I've got some smart cats.
What they're saying is, close proximity to extraterrestrials. Now, they could have narrowed that. They didn't have to. There's two ways you can have close proximity to extraterrestrials. One is they land in your backyard or out in the park and you just happen to be there, and you kind of, you're walking on over, and before you know it, you realize there's a couple of ETs outside the craft picking flowers or something, and before you know it, you're like 20 feet away, and that's, whatever, and or like the kids at Ruah or Westall who got pretty close to the ETs that were outside the craft, and they reported and drew them. That's one way you can have close proximity to a non-human intelligence. There is another way, and that is when they come for a visit and take you up for your annual exam. That is called an abduction, and the person involved is called a contactee. And so some people may not see this or get it, but that statement basically tells those who know this in the government that, yeah, the contactee thing, we know about that too. And that's implied. We'll get to that later. We don't need to get to it now. But they basically acknowledge the contactee phenomena in that sentence. But 99.9% of the people who read it will not see that. And then they say, what is collection? It's getting all the records together. What is the control disclosure campaign? That's the term that describes what's in the section. It's going to get it all out. And then controlling authority. Controlling authority is very important. And this is why they include it. Controlling authority means any, and they're very comprehensive here, any federal, state, or local government, office, agency, committee, commission, commercial, company, academic institution, or private sector entity, which means people or companies, in physical possession of technologies of unknown origin or biological evidence of non-human intelligence. A body would definitely qualify as that. So what that does is make it clear. And what is a controlling authority? That means when we refer to controlling authority in this bill, we're referring to somebody or an entity that's got stuff. If you've got stuff, you're controlling authority, which means at the current time, you're in control of that. Now that's about to change, but you're in control of it, and that's who we're talking to. If you don't have any tech, you may know about it, ET tech rather, you may know about it, but you're not in control. So again, important. The term director, the term director terms the director of the Office of Government Ethics, and that's very interesting. They're going to be referring to the director of government ethics. All right, there's a lot of directors out there, but they're hitting that one. Why? Because they well know that embedded in all of this are serious breaches of ethics, and that they're going to come up and they're going to need to be dealt with. And so they're letting you know that we're aware of that. And so they have mentioned that, yeah, when we say director, we're talking about not the director of Aero, but the director of government ethics, which is above Aero, basically. And then executive agency means an executive agency as defined in another section. Government office means any department, office, agency, committee, or commission of the federal government, and any independent office or agency without exception that has possession or control, or state, which makes them a controlling authority, including via contract, or other agreement of unidentified anomalous phenomena record. In other words, you may not have the record, but if you have a deal with an entity that does, then you're under this act. It's a government office. Okay? Okay? And then it goes on down to section 10, and this is also important. This act is going to be referring to leadership. Now, there's a lot of leadership out there, but the leadership that they're bringing up in this act is the specific leadership that's going to be addressing this, that's going to have to deal with this, and is going to have to deal with this bill. All right? And they list it. Majority Leader of the Senate, currently that is Warner. Minority Leader of the Senate, currently that's Rubio. Speaker of the House of Representatives, currently that is Johnson. The Minority Leader of the House of Representatives, currently that is Jeffries. A legacy program, okay? The term legacy program, which you're hearing more, means all federal, state, and local government, commercial, industry, academic, and private sector endeavors to collect, exploit, or reverse engineer technologies of unknown origin or examine biological evidence of living or deceased non-human intelligence that predates the date of the enactment of this act.
So what's the plan for dealing with legacy programs?
Well, it's in the act and it's there. We can go there if you want to a little later. I
I
can
mean,
check it out. But,
is there any talk of amnesty or how does that work?
well, they don't get into that. But the initial bill, and I'm not sure if it's in this bill, but it probably is in this amendment. Remember, that bill that was gutted stated that in terms of the uh, revealing process, the small d disclosure process, anything older than 25 years was at the head of the line. All right. And I'm not sure if that's in this bill. Obviously, but they're talking about in this context, they're talking about leadership of the identification, a leadership of Congress. The term leadership of Congress means. Now, why do they have? I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry. They define leadership of Congress as those four entities. These are the four major entities that are going to be referred to as leadership, and only these four as far as the bill. Then section 11 describes the legacy program, so we know what that is. Okay, that's pretty much everything involved with this, including all that predates the act. The National Archives is obvious. And then 13. Remember, we're talking about definitions and purposes. Non-human intelligence. The term non-human intelligence means any sentient, intelligent, non-human life form, regardless of nature or ultimate origin, that may be presumed responsible for UAP phenomena, or UAP, or of which the federal government has become aware. In other words, if you're aware of it, then this amendment covers it. Obviously, if you have it in your possession, it covers it. But just being aware of it, we got that covered too. So you can say, we don't have any non-human tech, we don't have any non-human bodies, and we don't even know what you're talking about. And that would be a lie, and that would be a violation of this bill. And then originating body means the executive agency, federal government commission, committee of Congress, or other governmental entity that created a record or particular information within a record. Similar to controlling authority, but you have situations where some entity has created something that they no longer have. They don't have a deal about it or a connection or a contract, but they did create it, but now it's housed elsewhere. They're at the originating body. They're included in the bill. 15, prosaic attribution. This is important. The term in prosaic attribution means having a human, either foreign or domestic origin, and operating according to current, proven, and generally understood scientific and engineering principles and established laws of nature, and not attributable to non-human intelligence. They're basically saying, they're giving you the term that they're going to be using when they're talking about things that are not non-human tech, in order to make the distinction within the bill or within the amendment. Public interest. This is important. They don't have to put this in the bill, but they put it in, right? And a lot of reasons a lot of this stuff is in the bill because of the work of you and the podcast army and the Twitter space infantry and the hundreds of researchers and the documentaries and 77 years of selfless engagement of this issue by the American people. Public interest. The term public interest means the compelling interest in the prompt public disclosure of unidentified UAP records for historical, governmental purposes, and for the purpose of fully informing the people of the United States about the history of the federal government's knowledge and involvement surrounding UAP, which means that probably Mike Rounds and Chuck Schumer have listened to and watched maybe a number of times the statement in 2002 at the National Press Club by none other than John Podesta, where he said, I paraphrase, it's time for the people to know the truth about unidentified phenomena because they have a right to know and because it's the law. Okay? Public interest. And then record refers to all of the stuff that could be a record. It's totally comprehensive. Review board means the UAP Records Review Board established under Section oh-7, technologies of unknown origin. The term technologies of unknown origin means any materials or metamaterials, ejecta, crash debris, mechanisms, machinery, equipment, assemblies or subassemblies, engineering models or processes, damaged or intact aerospace vehicles, and damaged or intact ocean surface and undersea craft associated with UAP, or incorporating science and technology that lacks prosaic attribution or known means of human manufacture. Meaning, you may not know it's extraterrestrial, but if you know it's not prosaic, right? It doesn't come under that heading, then you pretty much go ahead and assume it's extraterrestrial because this act covers it. And then the idea of temporarily non-attributed objects. This is simply about things that are in that zone where it's not absolutely decided yet. It's kind of getting into the nitty gritty. Not a big deal, but it's important in terms of the legal language. And let's see.
Okay, and this is fascinating, Steve. Guys, Steve was willing to go as long as we could go. My wife has just sprung this on me today that we have a baby 101 class to go to, and I've got to go learn how to change diapers. I would much rather be talking to Steve Bassett.
No. You would much rather be changing diapers, okay? That's what you're supposed to say, because this is the internet, my friend, and she'll be hearing about that. So, do we have any time left, or we need to cut
No,
it right
no,
now?
we have a few minutes. We have a few minutes.
Okay. Because I'm almost there. This is.
But I did want to ask you a couple of questions.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Let me just see if there's anything else particularly. Then they go into what the phenomena is. That's like hugely comprehensive. And this is the last one. Okay. Again, they're not screwing around in this amendment. UAP record. The term UAP record means a record that is related to unidentified anomalous phenomena, technologies of unknown origin or non-human intelligence, and all equivalent subjects by any other name, with the specific and sole exclusion of these temporarily non-attributed entities, that was created or made available for use by, obtained by, or otherwise came into possession of the Executive Office of the President, the Department of Defense and its progenitors, the Department of War, the Department of the Navy, the Department of the Army, the Department of the Navy, the Department of the Air Force, the Department of Energy, the Manhattan Project, the Atomic Energy Commission, and the Energy Research and Development Administration, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the CIA, the National Reconnaissance Office, the Defense Intelligence Office, the National Security Agency, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NASA, the FBI, the Federal Aviation Administration, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the Library of Congress, the National Archives and Records Administration, the Presidential Library, the Executive Agency, the independent office, and any independent office or agency, any other department, office, agency, committee, or commission of the federal government, any state or local government department, office, agency, or committee, commission, any private sector, and this is the key one, any private sector person or entity formerly or currently under contract or some other agreement with the federal government. Everybody. Now, have I said enough so that people watching this understand this is not another thing? It's just not another failed enterprise, that we're still dancing in the dark. Wake up. They have laid the gauntlet down. They have laid out the entire disclosure plan. They know the ETs are here. And they know that the president needs to confirm it. But first, we need to have the hearing. And having that hearing will make it a lot easier once that bill gets passed. We are on the 1 yard line, folks. So please don't leave the field and start getting more positive about this. Okay, I'm done with that. So I'm going to cruise on back here. I'm going to stop the share and get back on the camera.
Do you think there's a back door to disclosure? Just for example, the Schumer Rounds Amendment was passed, even if it was, a neutered version of it, and it does mention NHI multiple times. If the president were asked about that, hey, you signed this bill mentioning non-human intelligence.
Mhm.
Can you comment on that? If he said just anything at all, I mean, that would be disclosure,
And why
right?
do you think the president wasn't asked about it? I'll tell you why. Because one, there is a conflagration in the Middle East. The war in the Ukraine, still the greatest risk we've had for nuclear war. A political situation intensified and heated up. It was already bad to get to levels we've never seen anything like it. There's an election coming up. All right. And so, no, the president wasn't asked about it. Plus, the bill didn't, all the powers to enforce it were not there. And then there was pushback. The pushback in the Aero study gave the media the opportunity to step back and take a break. Now, believe the media's been covering this. The largest number of articles ever were published last year. We're on a pace for another. I say the largest number. I'm talking thousands upon thousands. I triaged 1,800 good ones, appropriate ones, and they're linked on my website right now under the media archive. We're on a pace for another 1,000. But the media is not crazy about having to write these articles. It's awkward for them. They will cover it, and they know it's a big deal and it's news, and so they're writing them. But it's always a little awkward for them, and so be able to take a break for a while, and so the media coverage has dropped way down while we deal with this other thing, electing the next president. That's why he has not been asked about it, and no, there is no back door. So, but the first bill made it easier. In other words, Chuck Schumer said, look, here it is. Everybody knows what's going on, right? The biggest event in human history is coming. Get on board, grab some of this legacy, vote for this act, be part of the disclosure process. It's nonpartisan. You got people, you got Republicans in the House behind it, you got Dems behind it. It's not partisan. It's a chance to make history. Get on board. Here it is. And the DOD and the defense contractors said, nah, we're talking money here, baby. Money talks, BS walks. Okay, so we're gutting the bill. You don't like it? Too bad. And so they gutted it. Okay, fine. But it generated a huge amount of press and awareness. The very act of gutting it undermined their cause. The error report, study report undermined their cause. And so now the status or the situation regarding this amendment is stronger than it would be otherwise. And so all of this is heading one place and one place only: disclosure from the US president. And it's a question of how many people will shake their head a little bit, wake up, open their eyes, and decide whether they want to be on the right side of history when the greatest paradigm shift in all of human history takes place. And they still have some time, right? If they need some consultation with me, I may have to call me, and if you're a member of Congress, an agency head, or maybe even a very rich corporation person. I can think of a couple, and you're kind of, warring, not worried, but you're not able to come to a decision on it. Call me, I can help.
Steve, I am actually I'm so glad I talked to you. I'm actually way much more optimistic about all this than I was before. Thank you so much. You're doing great, man. I really appreciate it. I've got to ask you though about something you said earlier
Mm-hmm.
about how the next UFO hearing, or at least one of them, the big one that you're talking about, might actually have witnesses that are separate from the David Grush 40 witnesses.
No. There's no David Grush 40 witnesses. David
Okay.
Grush
Explain what that means.
when David Grush came, what we've known, many witnesses had already approached the Senate Intel Committee and possibly Arrow, and had already been talked to. Many witnesses before Grush even sat down. When Grush sat down, the issue of witnesses became a really big deal, and we believe some new witnesses came forward because of his actions.
Well, no, I mean, during his investigation, when he was interviewing participants of these programs.
Well, these are just people he interviewed. They're not witnesses unless they're willing to come forward. Okay. I'm
Right.
talking about people that have come forward and said, I want to testify. Not everybody that he talked to wants to come forward and testify. As a matter of fact, I was made aware that another reason that Mark Warner, the esteemed chairman of the Intel Committee, put it off, right? Could have pulled the trigger, was that and this gets back to risk averse and the political situation, is that he really didn't want to hold it unless he was loaded up with first-hand witnesses. He wanted lots of people like the ones that Grush talked to that are actually working on the ET craft. They're firsthand. And apparently there weren't enough of those yet. And I was also made aware that one of the reasons for that is many of the people working on the craft, working in the legacy program firsthand, okay, don't feel there's enough witness protection yet. That doesn't mean that they view themselves as whistleblowers. They're just saying they don't think there's quite enough protection because, let's face it, if you're a guy who's been working on an ET craft for the last 20 years, and suddenly, if you're going to go in front of the Congress, you're going, boy, I hope that goes well, right? Right? And so there's a lot of people that are going to come up to you and say, I'm not threatening you anything, but like, yeah, we really prefer you didn't do that, right?
Right.
You're making 250,000 a year here, it's a great job, whatever. And so that's another reason. I get it. And so there's a lot of confusion about what and who and how and however. I try to get it, I try to understand as best I can and then convey that to the general public who are rightfully confused about all of this, to be honest.
Okay, that does help explain it. So we're probably talking about the same set of witnesses. In some of them, as the David Grush,
Some of
interviewees.
David
Yeah,
Grush's people
yeah,
that he
yeah.
interviewed are on the witness world, not all of them. And there are a number of people that have come forward that David Grush never talked to.
Okay, okay, that sounds really intriguing.
Basic,
And some
but
of those are direct participants that he didn't even interview.
absolutely, yes. You know how many first-hand witnesses there are to the ET situation?
Oh yeah,
Probably
lots.
thousands.
Yeah. I mean,
and
Richard
and
Dillon
that's one
calls
of
it
the
the
reasons.
breakaway civilization, and
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why the truth embargoes, cannot last because it has too many people, right? The more people you got in the program, the more difficult it is to ensure that everybody's, is on board, right, on the same page. And of course, we learned that everybody was no longer on the same page when in October of 2017, 10 careerists in the military intelligence complex came forward with their bios and photos as part of the to the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences. When that website went up with their bios and photos, that's all you needed to know, that a whole lot of people inside the federal government are not on the same page anymore on this issue of truth embargo.
Well, I mean, the very fact that these witnesses are still alive is encouraging. That there are some pro-disclosure people within the control group. Yeah.
Yeah, it's encouraging for them for sure. Uh, yeah, yeah. Of course, they're still alive. We don't do that anymore. We may have done a little of that long ago, but we don't do that anymore.
I don't know
Thank
those Boeing whistleblowers that keep committing suicide. I don't know. I don't know, Steve.
private. That's a private company that had nothing to do with UAP. Okay,
Okay, okay,
and
all right.
I'll tell you. I hope they investigate the hell out of that because Boeing has become a real problematic company. And if in fact those are not suicides, then a lot of people need to go to jail. And that's because well, it's awful, right? And it's in that whistleblower area, and so consequently, even though it's a airline issue, it's not UAP. It is sending a very bad message to people that are thinking about being a whistleblower in government on this issue. And that is one good reason why the entire force of the federal government should come down on those cases.
Totally
And,
agree.
and if they let that slide, right? I mean, they absolutely have to be certain about that, if not just for the families of those two gentlemen, but for the national interest of this country. But there's so much else going on. And by the way, they could be investigating the hell out of it right now, but they're not going to tell us. Those investigations will be absolutely private until they have clear evidence and understanding. So it wouldn't shock me if months from now, suddenly there is a very substantial report issued about the death of these two men.
All right, last question is the last one I have time for. I wish I need to get you back because you're so awesome. But okay, last question. You said something really provocative, and it's something that has been thrown out there for a while. But I wonder if you have some insight into this, that other countries may have some of this material and may have been working on it and got it to work. And that potentially they are flying around in their own ships with some of this technology. But you said they don't crash in the US. Why do they not crash and
No,
ETs
no. I
do?
said they don't all crash in the U.S., right? Okay, why would the U.S. be the only place that they crash? They're all over the world, and so common sense says that if they crash here, they crash elsewhere. Now, there's a number. This book right here. Hang on, just a second. Um, my leg went to sleep. Oops. Uh, this is the reissue of a book from years ago by Ryan Wood called Magic Eyes Only. In
I
the
haven't read
first
that.
edition, he gave what evidence he could find regarding 75 crashes. Well, the second edition is up to 115, I think. And so the general consensus amongst just about any researcher in the field is that other vehicles have crashed. Some of those were delivered to us if they landed in one of our nice friend-friendly country. But Russia, even now, after giving up 14 of its republics to be autonomous entities, even now, after that, is the largest country by landmass in the world. And for most of the 20th century, it was even larger than that. And so let me tell you, it's difficult to crash an ET vehicle and not land in Russia. And so I can't prove it. Nobody has proven it, but I'm going to put my money down on there's other vehicles in the hands of other countries. I'm pretty sure I'm going to collect.
I have no doubt you're right. You know, George Knapp went to Russia and he had some pretty suggestive evidence that there's definitely been programs in Russia, and that there's probably still.
I went to
Uh,
Russia. I
and,
asked the
and
same question and got the same answers. I think he talked to higher level people than me. But I went to Russia. I talked about 7 or 8 groups. There's some others that have gone, but whatever. It just take it for granted, and that's extremely important because remember that bill refers to technological surprise from where? Okay, from where? It's going to be from other nations. So the government in that amendment alone, Schumer and Rounds are acknowledging, yeah, of course, there's this tech is also in the hands. Now, does that mean that they're flying it? Not necessarily. Depends on how good their scientists are, right? Don't know. Okay, so that's not a certainty, right? But that they have it, yeah. And you think they just put it in a warehouse like in Indiana Jones, right? I don't think so. Okay, I'm sure they've been studying it with every resource they have, and all of that needs to come out down the line. And we need to combine the research of all of the cooperating nations that will participate to develop this science to service to not to make more weapons, but in service to the needs of human beings, which are legion. But I'll be honest with you, in my view, is that before we get there, which we will get there, but before we actually get that well underway, I think open contact is 2 years out. We get disclosure at the end of this year, early next year. Look for open contact in 2026. That's my number. It's just in my head. It's always been in my head.
any
That's
idea how
about
that
all
might play out?
it's based on a simple thing. Disclosure is going to launch a learning curve in the world in which a significant portion of everybody on this planet is going to be wanting to know about it. They're going to be learning about it. They're going to study it. They're going to pull it up on YouTube. They're going to read the books. They're going to read the docs. It's going to be this massive exchange, information process, a learning curve, unlike anything we've ever seen. And after about 2 years, the world's going to be pretty up to speed on this. They're going to know a lot. They're going to be even maybe bored with it. In which case, open contact would almost be anticlimactic, wouldn't it? And I happen to believe that if you look at the overall actions of ETs going back to the beginning, that's exactly where this has been going all along. Open contact, not the same as showing up in your bedroom at 2 a.m. Open contact, interactions between them and us, our governments, our authorities, and we are learning about it, being told about it, maybe even watching it, I don't know, but it is happening and we know about it. That is open contact, and that is the second phase of the paradigm shift. And that's where this is heading. And so as far as I'm concerned, disclosure is a two-year trip to open contact. Does it get better than that?
It
Right?
doesn't get much better than that, Steve.
Do we not? Wouldn't we not like that?
I think we would like that.
I think we would. And so we need to get this done for crying out loud. Please.
Okay, that is a fantastic button to end this on. I love it. Okay, we've got to have you back though. I've got to have you back, Steve. Okay, but where can people find you, and are you open to people contacting you?
Sure.
Let us know how that works.
ParadigmResearchGroup.org. All my contact information is there. Very soon, I'm about to convert the website to a think tank, and I'm going to be a nonprofit, 501c3, within weeks. I'm going to put up a GoFundMe, try to raise some money. I've got a couple of big projects I want to do as a nonprofit. I'm also very much supporting actively the newparadigminstitute.org. Go to that website. Huge. All kinds of stuff going on there. Danny Sheehan is the head. They've got a board. They've got lawyers. They got all kinds of stuff. Uh, the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance is a nonprofit entity designed to network these two worlds together so they can make contact and get the story right. It is if you have a history in the content creating world, if you have some time and grade in history with respect to the UAP issue, you know what I'm talking about, and you want to be a founding member, you can contact me or Dan Harari through that site. We will review your interest, and possibly you could become a founding member of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. We have 161 members now, one Oscar winner, one on the way, and so we bootstrapped it. Dan and I funded everything the first year. Now we're charging a membership fee. It's not much, but it's already creating deals. It's already happening and getting a lot of press. And so Dan and I did that, but there's more to do. And I'm hoping that PRG as a nonprofit will get the kind of funding that will allow me to be me and really take advantage of all my skills and history and knowledge, right? Because I've been operating sub-funded from the beginning, because I'm really bad at making or raising money. It's not my strong suit. I just, what can I say?
It's all going to
So
change
that's
now,
it.
though.
That's what I got. Yeah. All right, my
Man,
friend, go and learn how to change a diaper. My regards to your wife.
man, I would so much rather be spending the next
Oh, no, 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 no,
three
no. You
hours
want to be,
talking to you, man. But
absolutely.
yeah, it's gonna 3 hour class, 3 hour class about stuff like that. Okay, man.
No,
Thank
when
you
the
so
baby
much for coming
happens.
on the show.
Okay.
I can't wait to have you back. And you got me jazzed about UFO disclosure like I wasn't before I talked to you. So
And then I have my job is done here.
your job is done. Thank you,
All right,
man.
man.
See you next time.
Until next time.